After Leo admitted he liked men, his mother became frantic. She put her faith in something she'd found online and insisted on treating him with herbal remedies. The next day, she dragged him to a holistic wellness center to see a Dr. Cole. She had no idea Dr. Cole was the man her son had been dating for 8 years. He dropped to his knees in front of her. "Ma'am," he pleaded, "I'm Leo's boyfriend. Please don't fix him. If he's fixed, what will happen to me?" It's worth mentioning that Dr. Evan Cole was hopelessly romantic. His mother's constant nagging about marriage had become unbearable. After long deliberation, Leo had finally decided to come out. He figured he'd give his parents some time to process it, to get used to the idea of him liking men, and then he would introduce them to his boyfriend. He had severely underestimated his mother's reaction. It began with screaming and shouting, which morphed into threats of a good thrashing, and finally culminated in her scouring the internet for cures, vowing to fix his illness. A cold dread washed over him as he pictured the horrific conversion therapy stories he'd heard, a morbid fear that his mother might actually find one of those places. After 2 days glued to her phone, she seemed to have found her answer. She declared that people in the comments of some forum swore by herbal treatments. She announced they were going to a specialist the next day, her voice firm, insisting this problem had to be solved. Their family, she reminded him, had a legacy to continue, and he couldn't afford to be so selfish. Not satisfied with her own tirade, she tried to incite his father to beat him, suggesting that a good whack with a straight stick might just straighten him out. The absurdity of her logic, gleaned from some backwater message board, made Leo want to find the original poster and have words. As his father grabbed a broom handle and started toward him, Leo scrambled into his room, slamming and locking the door. Huddled in the safety of his bedroom, he miserably tapped out a message to his boyfriend. The situation was grim. His parents were not taking it well, and his dad had just tried to come after him. Evan's reply was instantaneous. A flood of texts poured in, asking if he was hurt, where he'd been hit, if it was painful. Evan offered to come over immediately, insisting they should hit him instead, never Leo. The screen filled with a cascade of worried questions, asking if he was okay, if he was crying, if they were still trying to get to him, each message punctuated with a term of endearment. The sheer volume of affection was almost overwhelming. Leo quickly reassured him that he was fine, locked safely in his room, and told him not to come over just yet. It was better to wait a couple of days and let things cool down before Evan came to meet his parents. Evan, placated, immediately shifted gears, his texts now a stream of questions about what gifts he should bring for the future in-laws. He wondered if they'd appreciate a nice bottle of bourbon or some premium cigars for his dad, and perhaps a designer handbag for his mom. Reading the messages, Leo felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. After a year of tentative flirting and 8 years of a committed relationship, Evan's fiery passion had never dimmed. Having a hopelessly devoted partner certainly made life better. The next morning, before the sun was even up, his mother was banging on his door, reminding him of their appointment. She was going to cure him with some kind of hormonal balancing tea she'd read about, convinced it would suppress his deviant tendencies. Hiding under the covers, Leo muffled a laugh that shook his whole body for a full 3 minutes before he finally emerged. It was just too ridiculous. If he ever went broke, he mused, he could make a fortune selling his mother bogus health supplements. After he was hustled through his morning routine, they got in the car to drive to the clinic. The route felt increasingly familiar, a strange sense of déjà vu creeping over him. Finally, when they pulled up to a familiar storefront, his jaw nearly hit the dashboard. The world was indeed much smaller than he'd thought. He exchanged a flurry of frantic, wide-eyed glances and subtle gestures with the staff inside before following his mother into the consultation room. The moment Evan Cole saw him, his professional calm evaporated. His voice was laced with urgency as he asked what was wrong. Leo shot him a playful wink and a covert air kiss, a silent signal that he was perfectly fine. Just as Evan started to pout in response, Leo's mother let out a heavy sigh and collapsed onto the chair across from him. She began to pour out her troubles, explaining that she was at her wit's end, that a parent's love could be a heavy burden, and that she had come to him as a last resort. Evan looked utterly bewildered. He urged her to speak slowly and tell him what had happened. She lamented that her son was attracted to men and asked what could possibly be done. She'd read online that alternative medicine could rebalance him, and she begged Dr. Cole to help, to fix her son, her only child. The last word had barely left her lips when Evan fell to his knees. He begged her not to have him treated. He confessed he was Leo's boyfriend of 8 years and that he couldn't live without him. He pleaded with her not to cure him, asking what he would do if Leo was changed. He had been with him since he was 20. Please, perhaps a man could be too much of a romantic. Right now, for instance, Leo felt a profound, soul-crushing embarrassment. His mother was stunned into silence, her eyes darting toward Leo for some kind of explanation. Leo didn't know where to look. He glanced out the door and saw the young receptionist, Jessica, grinning wider than a Cheshire cat. He was just thankful there were no other patients in the waiting room to witness this mortifying spectacle. He wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. He would have happily dug the hole himself. He'd always believed you could laugh your way through anything, but after standing there and forcing 35 separate smiles, the situation remained just as painfully awkward as ever. He figured he might as well try one more. Eventually, his mother agreed to let Evan visit their home. Perhaps it was his medical expertise, or the fact that he'd given her a complimentary, custom-blended herbal tincture that seemed to be helping the sunspots on her face. Maybe it was the week he spent giving free chair massages at the community farmers market just down the block from their house, which miraculously cured her insomnia. Or it could have been the 2 hours he stood in line to get her a carton of free-range organic eggs from a promotional giveaway. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the way he called her ma'am with such earnest respect that it simply wore her down. Whatever the reason, his mother had finally relented. She even sang his praises, calling Evan a good kid and saying she liked him. She told Leo that if she were Evan's mother, she wouldn't approve of the two of them. Leo's face darkened. He grumbled about what was so wrong with him. The night before Evan's official visit, Leo's phone was bombarded with messages, keeping him up most of the night. He had just drifted into a light sleep when the notifications started again. Evan wanted to know if he was awake and needed his opinion on which outfit to wear. He asked if Leo had eaten breakfast and offered to bring him his favorite breakfast tacos from that little food truck on 3rd Street. He sent updates about their cat, Whiskers, who apparently missed Leo terribly, though not as much as Evan did. The barrage of texts culminated in a final message just as his doorbell rang, announcing Evan's arrival for his first official visit, expressing his terror that Leo's parents wouldn't like him after a sleepless night of anxiety. Leo, feeling utterly drained, opened the door to a sight that shocked him. Evan was hauling in bag after bag of gifts, so many that it looked like he'd hired a moving van. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, a look of grave importance on his face that made him look even more handsome. Compared to Leo's worn-out pajama pants, Evan looked like he was there to negotiate a corporate merger. Evan shot him a quick wink, whispering that he was there to claim his title. A blush crept up Leo's neck as he understood. They were alone in the entryway, and between trips to the car, Evan stole a quick, firm kiss. Leo chuckled, leaning in to return it just as his mother appeared. She welcomed Evan warmly, and soon the entire family was involved in the great gift-hauling operation. The small storage closet was quickly filled to bursting, leaving almost no room to stand. His parents stared, wide-eyed, at the mountain of presents, remarking that he was far too generous. Evan humbly insisted it was the proper thing to do. Since he'd arrived earlier than expected, they hadn't prepared breakfast. As they were about to suggest a nearby diner, Evan produced 2 insulated containers from one of the bags. He presented one to Leo, explaining that it was a breakfast he'd made for him, complete with the promised tacos. He then turned to Leo's parents, offering to cook whatever they desired, boasting of his culinary skills honed in a special training course. His mother, now somewhat acclimated to his intense enthusiasm, calmly requested an omelet. His father was a different story. A man steeped in tradition for 54 years, he was struggling to accept the prospect of a son-in-law. His hand, holding a glass of water, trembled visibly. He shot periodic glares at Leo but, appeased by the sight of the expensive bourbon and fine cigars, managed to swallow his objections. After taking their orders, Evan rolled up his sleeves and disappeared into the kitchen. Leo, meanwhile, happily dug into his breakfast, realizing how much he'd missed Evan's cooking. The food was always seasoned exactly to his liking. His mother watched the kitchen with a critical eye, impressed by Evan's practiced efficiency. She turned to Leo, her expression one of disbelief, and asked him how on earth he'd managed to train Evan so well. Leo was equally shocked. This was his traditional mother using modern slang? It was incredible. He popped a pistachio into his mouth, replying nonchalantly that the key was to find a romantic from the start. His mother sighed, clarifying that she meant he was accomplished in every way. A great doctor, a great cook with a wonderful personality. She confessed she couldn't understand what Evan saw in him. Leo felt a sting of indignation. Was this his own mother, taking someone else's side? He sulked, and she continued, unfazed, pointing out that he never lifted a finger around the house and was lazy as could be. It was obvious, she said, that Dr. Cole did everything for him. Leo put on a mysterious air, suggesting that maybe he was just lucky, and she shouldn't be jealous. His father snorted from the living room, him not to be fooled. He'd read online, he said, that men like them were fickle and ran with unsavory crowds. He cautioned Leo not to be led astray. Leo mumbled a quiet protest, reminding him they'd been together for 8 years and he shouldn't speak about things he didn't know. The truth was, this was Evan on his best behavior. He had always been this wonderful to him. In all their years together, they'd never had a serious fight or given each other the silent treatment. They couldn't bear to see the other upset. While Leo sometimes feigned annoyance at Evan's over-the-top romance, he secretly loved it. They were a perfect match. He suddenly realized that if it were just the two of them, Evan would have already pulled him into the kitchen to cook together. He defended Evan more forcefully to his father, insisting that he was a good person and that Leo trusted him implicitly, not just because he trusted his own judgment, but because he trusted Evan. Evan had been a kind and decent person even before they'd ever met. The roar of the range hood was loud, and Leo hoped his father's words hadn't reached the kitchen. Evan was the best boyfriend in the world, and he wouldn't let anyone's casual judgment, not even his father's, tarnish that. Just then, Evan glanced out and saw Leo shelling his own pistachios. He quickly wiped his hands on his apron and hurried over. He explained that he knew Leo loved them and had shelled some for him, but had forgotten to bring them out. He produced a glass jar filled with perfectly shelled pistachios from one of the gift bags. As Leo took the jar, he subtly brushed his thumb against Evan's hand and popped one of the nuts into his mouth. Evan, suppressing a smile, playfully nipped his thumb before turning back to the kitchen. His father's reaction was one of pure shock, his eyes wider than Leo had ever seen them. His mother simply pointed at the bowl of unshelled pistachios on the coffee table and looked at her husband. Wordlessly, his father pulled the bowl in front of himself and began to shell them, muttering under his breath about being shown up and how this kid better watch himself if he wanted to be welcomed into their home. And just like that, Evan became the family's accepted, unofficial son-in-law. He started coming over all the time, making tea for Leo's father, diagnosing the goldfish's swim bladder problem, and teaching him how to master his new barbecue smoker. He had his father laughing so much that new wrinkles appeared around his eyes. Through sheer force of personality, Evan had won them both over. Leo could only marvel at his incredible patience and charm. He was now more familiar with the layout of his parents' house than Leo was, knowing exactly where everything was kept. His parents were delighted whenever he visited, leaving Leo as the only one with complaints. Having Evan around constantly meant that a single shared glance could spark a fire between them, a fire that was perpetually extinguished by the presence of his parents. He couldn't even get a proper kiss. He almost wished Evan would stay away. The constant temptation, the inability to have him, felt like his heart was being used as a scratching post by 1,000 tiny kittens. It was maddening. As Leo was leaving work, a strong arm wrapped around his shoulders. He didn't need to guess who it was. Evan had been so focused on impressing his parents lately that he hadn't had time to pick him up. He pulled Leo into his car and, without a word, kissed him deeply, murmuring how much he'd missed him. He'd hoped that being at the house more would create opportunities to steal a moment alone, but they hadn't managed to get a single one. Leo, his mouth still tingling, nodded in agreement. The spring air was dry, and his lips were already chapped. The kiss had been so intense it had drawn a bit of blood. Evan sighed, gently placed Leo's beanie on his head, and got out of the car, heading toward a nearby convenience store. He returned a moment later with a small bag. He cupped Leo's face, ready to apply some lip balm, then paused. Leo nudged his arm, asking what was wrong. Evan confessed he was torn between kissing him more and applying the balm, because once it was on, the kissing wouldn't be the same. Leo was flustered, his face turning a deep crimson. As he was about to suggest they kiss first, Evan started applying the balm to his own lips. While Leo watched in confusion, Evan leaned in and kissed him again, a soft, smooth kiss. He pulled back after a moment, asking for a review of his technique. He was always asking for feedback. Leo chose his words carefully, remarking that after 8 years, there had been steady improvement and that he deserved an award. Evan coughed lightly, clarifying that he meant his lip balm application technique. Leo, at a loss for words, turned and rolled down the window. Just then, a little girl's voice piped up from the sidewalk. "Mommy, look, the brothers are done kissing." A woman gasped and bent down, covering the girl's mouth, shushing her loudly. Leo pretended not to hear, his neck rigid as he slowly rolled the window back up. He and Evan stared at each other for a silent, mortified second before Evan slammed the car into drive and sped away as if they were fleeing a crime scene. They hid out in a secluded corner of their apartment building's parking garage, but the mood was broken. Now, even if they wanted to, they were too nervous to kiss again. It was rush hour, and the garage was full of people coming home from work. Fearing a repeat of the earlier incident, Leo staunchly fended off all of Evan's attempts. Frustrated, Evan nipped his wrist playfully, calling him a spoilsport. In the elevator, Evan gently kneaded the soft flesh of his wrist, whispering a plan for that evening. He told Leo to leave his door unlocked, that he had a way to secure a sleepover, and that Leo just needed to let him in. Leo nodded in agreement. His parents hadn't yet invited Evan to stay the night, and Evan hadn't pushed it. He wondered if the scheme would work. Evan proved to be quite clever. During dinner, he deliberately had a couple of glasses of wine with Leo's father and then feigned being too drunk to drive. Since Leo's father had also been drinking and Leo didn't have a license, there was no one to take him home. The plan was a success. His mother set Evan up in the guest room. As she was helping him with a cool towel for his forehead, Evan shot Leo a triumphant grin from behind her back, silently mouthing about how great his acting was. He was the best actor Leo had ever seen. He repeatedly reminded Leo to leave the door unlocked for him later. Separated by a single wall, Evan's texts flooded Leo's phone, nearly maxing out its memory. He wrote about how the thought of sleeping next to Leo was giving him superhuman strength, lamenting how long it had been since they'd been intimate and asking if Leo missed him too. When Leo didn't reply, Evan's texts grew anxious, wondering if someone was in the room with him. He proposed they play a little game later, mentioning that he'd brought his stethoscope. He even sent a link to a video, telling Leo to watch it with headphones. Hiding under his blankets, Leo squirmed with a mix of embarrassment and anticipation. He did manage to send a word of caution, Evan, that his old bed was prone to squeaking and might not hold up. Evan's reply was simple, they could stand. Leo's face flushed. He changed Evan's contact name in his phone to Dr. Dirty. In the middle of the night, Evan crept into his room and climbed into his bed, holding him close and nuzzling against him. He whispered how much he'd missed holding him, how heavenly he smelled, and how agonizing the past few days had been. He begged Leo to talk to his parents about moving back in with him. Leo didn't answer, instead giving him a sharp jab with his elbow. Evan deftly caught his arm, twisted him onto his back, and pinned him with his legs. He teased him, asking if he was playing hard to get tonight. With that, he produced the now warm stethoscope. "Let me listen to what this virtuous heart is thinking," he murmured, leaning in for a kiss. Leo's protests were smothered. He was speechless, caught in a moment of pure, helpless frustration. Just as he was on the verge of tears from the sheer absurdity of it all, a calm voice spoke from the other side of the bed. "Ah, youth. Good lung capacity on this one. Must be at least 3,000 or 4,000 milliliters." The room was suddenly plunged into a strange, heavy silence. Leo had never been so mortified in his life. Pinned beneath his boyfriend, with his father lying right beside him. He wished the universe could just delete him on the spot. He didn't know why, but his dad had suddenly decided to sleep in his room tonight, refusing to be dislodged and forbidding him from using his phone. Now it was clear, it had been a trap. After a tense moment, Evan buried his face in Leo's neck. "Oh, hello, sir," he said, his voice strained. "Fancy seeing you here. I have to go. I seem to have gotten lost in your lovely, spacious home." I certainly wasn't trying to kiss Leo. With that, he scrambled out of the room so fast he was practically a blur. His father, a sly smile on his face, calmly picked up his phone and resumed his mobile game. "Nice try, kid," he chuckled. "I pulled that same move when I was your age." "Fine. The old pro wins." Leo tossed and turned for what felt like an eternity. Just as his father was about to fall asleep, he finally worked up the nerve to ask the question that was burning in his mind. He wanted to know if, back in the day, his father's plan had been successful. Had he managed to sneak into his mother's room? His father responded with a sharp flick to his forehead. "Go to sleep." Leo retreated under the covers, rubbing his head and nursing his wounded pride. On his phone, Evan was having a complete meltdown. He desperately texted Leo, asking him to confirm that the whole thing had been a nightmare, that he'd somehow slipped into a parallel universe. He couldn't understand why his dad was there and why Leo hadn't warned him. He was dying of humiliation. He declared he was going on a long sea voyage and wouldn't be over for dinner tomorrow. He asked if Leo wanted to elope. He even suggested finding a hypnotist to erase his father's memory. Leo quickly explained that his dad had been specifically lying in wait for him and had confiscated his phone as soon as he entered the room to prevent him from tipping Evan off. After a long pause, Evan replied with a single horrified thought. His image was ruined. He wondered if his dad had seen all the suggestive texts he'd sent. The respectable persona he had so carefully constructed was shattered. The next morning, Evan was nowhere to be found. His father, bleary-eyed and brushing his teeth, asked Leo if Evan was genuinely angry. He seemed concerned, asking if Leo was upset with him. He explained he was only trying to protect him, to make sure he wasn't taken advantage of. Leo could only laugh. Sometimes you had to consider whether the victim was a willing participant. Leo was a computer science major who loved playing basketball. He'd sprained his ankle once and had gone to the university health clinic, where Evan had been the doctor on duty. Leo had been smitten instantly. Evan was devastatingly handsome, exactly his type. He remembered the sunlight catching the edge of his silhouette, creating a halo only Leo could see. He felt like he could drown in the man's eyes. From that day on, he manufactured excuses to visit the clinic, buying antacids or digestive aids he didn't need. They gradually became friendly and eventually exchanged numbers. It had taken a considerable amount of effort just to figure out if Evan was even interested in men. Once he had a strong suspicion, Leo launched a full-on campaign, sending Evan a steady stream of photos of his abs. He'd ask for Dr. Cole's professional opinion on his uneven muscle definition or whether his sweat patterns post-workout were normal. He even asked if Evan thought his legs were straight and cheekily requested a comparison. After he finally won him over, he spent 6 months playing it cool. Evan was incredibly restrained. Their kisses were chaste, and he rarely held his hand in public. 98% of their physical affection was initiated by Leo. Finally, fed up with the slow pace, Leo took a 5-day leave from his part-time job and essentially held Evan captive in his apartment. It was only then that he discovered they were both just as intense as the other. It was a perfect, twisted match. Given how difficult it was to get a moment alone now, they had to take a day off and book a hotel room. After a long afternoon of making up for lost time and soothing Evan's frayed nerves, Evan lay beside him, whispering that he never wanted to see his father again. The memory alone made his heart race. He had never been so embarrassed in his entire life. Leo gently smoothed the sweat from his forehead and lowered the thermostat. He agreed it had been awkward, but it was over, and they just had to pretend it never happened. They lay there talking for a while before it was time to go. As Evan was buckling his belt, he mentioned that his mother wanted to meet Leo. If both sets of parents were okay with it, he suggested they could go abroad and get married. Leo shot up in bed. It was so sudden. He had a deep-seated fear of meeting elders, and the thought of facing Evan's parents sent a wave of panic through him. He knew he wouldn't sleep that night. Evan kissed him a couple of times, then casually packed a pair of handcuffs back into his briefcase. He reassured Leo that his mom was easygoing and his dad didn't meddle. He promised to be there to support him. The anxiety began to set in. He had his own parents on board, but what about Evan's? The man wasn't an orphan. He knew his parents were both university professors, and the thought of being scrutinized by two serious intellectual academics as a potential partner for their son was terrifying. He was also afraid that if they did object, he wouldn't have the same relentless determination Evan had shown with his own family. His fears materialized sooner than expected. That Thursday, while he was taking a break in the office kitchen, he received a friend request on his social media. The name was Amelia Cole. The message read, "Hello, I'm Evan's mother." His heart began to pound in his chest. He nervously accepted the request. Her message came immediately, "You must be Leo. We should talk." He agreed. They met at a Starbucks near his office. She was an elegant, sophisticated woman wearing sunglasses and a wide-brimmed white hat that obscured her expression. Leo was so nervous he just stared at his hands, fiddling with his fingers. Seeing his anxiety, she chuckled softly and told him not to be nervous, that they had met before. She took off her glasses. Leo recognized her instantly. She was the woman he often saw at the university library. They had frequently shared the same large table, sitting across from each other, and had developed a quiet familiarity. He'd always assumed she was a graduate student and called her his senior. He remembered one time when she'd gotten into an argument with a guy eating pungent takeout in the quiet study area, and Leo had jumped in to back her up. After that, their nods of greeting became a little warmer. She would occasionally save him a seat, and he would often grab her a coffee in return. After he started dating Evan, his library visits became less frequent. He never would have guessed that the grad student was Evan's mother. The world truly was a small place. Looking at her now, he could see the strong resemblance between her and Evan. He told her that after all these years, she hadn't changed a bit, still looking just as young. She smiled and explained that she and her husband rarely interfered in Evan's life. She had wanted to meet him to put his mind at ease. She said it was important for them to know each other, since they would be family. She asked him to be patient with Evan if he ever made mistakes, and to guide him. She knew they were both good kids, and since they had chosen to love each other, they should continue on that path with conviction. She assured him that they would not stand in their way. Her words brought a warmth to Leo's eyes. He promised her they would. After she left, Leo sent a quick message to Evan. "Suddenly really miss you. Evan didn't reply immediately, and Leo figured he was busy with a patient. He went back to work, typing out lines of code. When the afternoon snacks arrived, he grabbed a cupcake and was about to snap a picture for Evan when a coworker called his name. Someone was there to see him. He turned and saw a flushed, breathless Evan peering into the office. The moment their eyes met, Evan rushed over. He asked if Leo was all right. Confused, Leo assured him he was fine and asked what was wrong. He noticed Evan was sweating and asked if he had run all the way there. His wellness center was a good 5 miles away. He led Evan into an empty conference room and got him a glass of water. Evan, catching his breath, explained that he had panicked. He'd received Leo's text and had been terrified that something was wrong. Leo had never sent a message like that before. Leo paused. He had always thought of himself as emotionally expressive. He opened their chat history and searched for the phrase "I miss you." He was stunned to see that in 8 years, he had never once typed those words. It had always been Evan. A wave of guilt washed over him. He apologized, promising to say it more often. He didn't want something so romantic to become a source of anxiety for Evan. Evan simply took his hand and, with no hint of passion, just pure tenderness, kissed his eyelids. "Okay," he said softly. A major project at work wrapped up, and Leo received a hefty bonus. The first thing he did was take a week of vacation and call Evan. He told him he had money, he was taking him on a trip, and he needed to pack a bag. He'd already bought the tickets. They went to Charleston. They walked along the historic waterfront, visited places they'd only read about, shared every meal, and listened to the same music through a shared pair of earbuds. Everything he had was Evan's, and everything Evan had was his. When he said this to him, Evan adopted a mock-serious tone and replied that there was one place he had that was entirely Leo's. Leo, holding his camera, jumped back playfully, hoping the next thing he understood instantly was a math problem. Evan doubled over with laughter, clarifying through his giggles that he was talking about his heart, and asking where Leo's mind had gone. On their last night, they were sitting on the beach, listening to the waves. Leo asked if it would be weird if he lay down on the sand. Without a word, Evan lay down first. "Not anymore," he said. Leo lay down beside him. After a few moments of comfortable silence, Evan took his hand. He asked how Leo was feeling today. Leo said he was feeling great. Evan pressed on, kissing his jawline, and asked if that meant he was in a mood where he would agree to anything. Leo's mind raced with possibilities. He couldn't guess what was coming. He told Evan he had to say it first and then he would consider it. The next second, Evan pulled out a ring. "I want you to marry me, Leo. I've liked you for a long time, and I've loved you for even longer. I hope you'll give me the chance to keep loving you, officially. Make me an honest man." From his own pocket, Leo pulled out the engagement ring he had bought. He was caught between tears and laughter, a mixture of surprise and overwhelming emotion. It was just like Evan, he thought, to beat him to the punch again. Evan laughed, took his hand, and slid the ring onto his finger. Then he held out his own hand expectantly. With feigned annoyance, Leo slid the matching ring onto Evan's finger. It reminded him of the day Evan had first confessed his feelings. Leo had spent all day psyching himself up, rehearsing the words, only for Evan to beat him to it during a walk across campus. Evan had simply stopped, called his name, and said, "Leo, I like you a lot, and I think you like me too. So, do you want to try being boyfriends?" After Leo had agreed, he'd complained that Evan had stolen all his lines. Evan had just taken his hand, their fingers intertwining in a way that was both dominant and gentle, and promised that from then on, Leo could take the lead. He would follow. Everything that came after felt like it was meant to be. Their busy work schedules made it difficult to find time to go abroad for the legal ceremony, but their parents had met and acknowledged their relationship. On the day of their engagement party, Leo's mother, her eyes shimmering with tears, added Evan's fingerprint to their smart lock, saying it would be more convenient for him to come and go. She said that since she'd accepted them, she didn't want to bother with pointless formalities. All that mattered was that they were happy together. Her only request was that if they ever fought and considered separating, they should remember how hard they had worked just to be together. Her words touched Leo deeply, and he pulled Evan into a fierce hug and kiss. He reassured his mom that they had been together for 8 years without a single fight. A person only gets so many 8-year stretches in their life. His mother wiped a tear, complaining that she thought gaining a son-in-law would feel like adding to the family. But watching them today, it felt more like she was marrying off her daughter. Evan's mother put a comforting arm around her, telling her not to think of it that way. She now had 2 sons. While others got a son-in-law who was like half a son, she was getting the equivalent of 2. It was a net gain. This made his mother laugh, and she immediately started showing Evan's mom Leo's childhood photos. She lamented that Leo had always hated having his picture taken, so she didn't have many, and some had been lost during a move. As Evan looked through the album, his mother peered over his shoulder. Leo felt a little shy, as if his entire past was being laid bare for them to see. Suddenly, Amelia pointed to a photo from a kindergarten talent show and exclaimed, "That's Evan! You two were in the same class." They looked at each other, stunned by the coincidence. Neither of them had any memory of it. Later, when they got back to their new apartment, Evan insisted on carrying Leo across the threshold. He claimed it was a tradition from his hometown, that the groom had to carry the bride into their new home for a happy and fulfilling life. Leo wrapped his arms around Evan's neck, a thoughtful expression on his face. He said that they didn't just want fulfillment, they wanted passion. "Evan," he said, "we have to have a really, really good life together. We will," Evan promised. They entered their new home locked in a kiss. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, Leo had to work late. Evan got off early, bought a bouquet of flowers, and went home to set up a small celebration. When Leo arrived, he was carrying a small box of the pastries Evan had casually mentioned wanting the night before. The first thing he did when he walked in the door was give Evan a kiss. Evan wished him a happy 3rd wedding anniversary. Leo grunted in response, asking what else. Evan smiled. "Happy 12th dating anniversary." Leo smiled back. "You too." Leo had recently become fixated on getting his abs back, insisting he'd gotten soft. Evan told him he loved him no matter what, but Leo was determined. To support him, Evan started researching and preparing healthy, low-fat meals. One day, Leo forgot his lunch, so Evan went to his office to drop it off. As he approached Leo's desk, he overheard him talking to a colleague, sharing relationship advice. Leo was saying that for a partnership to work, the feelings had to be mutual. It was a 2-person act. You couldn't have a one-man show. He spoke of his and Evan's love, stating without exaggeration that in their 13 years together, they had never once raised their voices to each other. He reasoned it was because they couldn't bear to make the other person unhappy. Life always had its bumps, but whenever he felt his temper rising, he would instinctively think about how his words might hurt Evan, and he would stop himself. He didn't want the person he loved more than anything to be unhappy because of something trivial he said. True affection, he explained, came with a certain carefulness, a reluctance to cause pain. It came from a deep-seated fear of loss, which made you cherish what you had. This wasn't about losing himself. It was about choosing a different way to treat the person he loved. He concluded by saying that who you spend your life with matters immensely. He talked about how, over all their years together, Evan had always been a source of incredible emotional support. No matter what he did, Evan would praise him extravagantly. If he washed a single dish, Evan would declare it the cleanest dish in the world. And he was fiercely protective. Evan recalled a time a patient had been yelling at him, and Leo had arrived just in time. He'd stepped directly in front of Evan, shielding him and handling the situation, refusing to let anyone get near him. Evan was supposed to be the husband, the protector, yet in that moment being shielded by Leo, he felt the softest part of his heart being struck again and again. Leo had told him later that Evan, in his doctor's coat, shouldn't get into arguments. But he was different. He could. Besides, he said he would never just stand by and watch someone bully him. Evan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for having met Leo, for being with him. Reality wasn't a fairy tale, but two people in love could work hard to write their own happy ending. He just hoped Leo would always be happy. He would never give up on loving him.